You can't possibly be serious, those hairless primates, Chief Commander Dreller, though to any human it would have sounded like someone rapidly typing on a keyboard made of bone. I am entirely serious, Commander, replied Ambassador Zixvoth, her tentacle. Appendages rippling with anxiety, the intelligence reports are quite clear. The humans have claimed 17 worlds in the past 3 standard cycles, 17, and that's just their officially documented expansions, the gathered representatives of the Galactic Apex Hunter Alliance, or GAHA as humans would later mockingly refer to. Them exchanged nervous glances around their crystalline war table. Their headquarters, nestled within the hollow moon of Clethera, had never felt so small, but they lack proper exoskeletons, protested General Verse of the Chelicerat Dominion, his 8 eyes blinking in asynchronous patterns of disbelief. They're basically walking water balloons, one puncture, and they leak everywhere. Ambassador Zixvoth activated the holographic display. With a wave of her upper tentacle, that's precisely what the Scourge Emperor thought before the humans. Well, the hologram flickered to life, displaying footage of a human settlement on Proxima Centauri B. It looked unremarkable at first: dome structures, atmospheric processors, and some primitive ground vehicles. Then the image shifted to show a Scourge battlecruiser descending through the clouds, its kilometer-long hull bristling with plasma cannons and reality-shredding weaponry. The room fell silent. As they watched what happened next, Captain Ree Blackwood was having a spectacularly ordinary Tuesday. He'd woken up, brushed his teeth with the last drags of toothpaste. Mental note pickup more from the commissary argued with the coffee dispenser, until it produced something vaguely coffee-adjacent and was now watching as an alien battlecruiser the size of Manhattan descended toward New Hope Colony with obvious hostile intent. Huh, he said, taking another sip of his not-quite-coffee. That's new, his second-in-command. Lieutenant Olivia Martinez burst into the command center, her uniform hastily thrown on and her dark hair still wet from the shower. "Sir, we have a situation." "No kidding," Ree replied, gesturing toward the massive view screen. Displaying the approaching alien vessel. "Got any ideas? Because I'm pretty sure our colony defense batteries weren't designed with cosmic horror from beyond the stars in mind." Olivia blinked at the screen, then at her captain, then back at the screen. Have we tried communicating with them?" "First thing I did, they responded with something that the translator interpreted as, 'Prepare for harvest protein sacks.' Not super promising for diplomatic relations evacuation. There's 30 colonists here. Martinez, even if we had enough shuttles, which we don't, there's nowhere to go. Proxima B isn't exactly flush with habitable real estate outside our atmospheric domes, Lieutenant." Martinez approached the command console, studying the readouts of the alien ship. "Sir, if I may, what exactly is our plan?" Captain Blackwood finished his coffee, grimaced at the taste, and set the mug down with a decisive click. "Plan. Oh, we're going to win, Lieutenant, win." She said it flatly. Not ASA question, but as if testing whether the word had somehow changed meaning overnight. "Absolutely." He pressed a button on his console defense command. "This is Captain Blackwood. Activate protocol. Rude awakening." There was a pause, and then a voice responded. "Sir R. You sure that's only theoretical? We've never actually do it." The assembled Apex hunters watched in stunned silence as the footage continued. The human settlement, which had appeared defenseless, suddenly sprouted hundreds of concealed missile silos. But instead of conventional weapons, each silo launched what appeared to be small metal pods. "What are those?" asked War Prince Cathar of the Silicon Harmony. Ambassador Zixvoth's voice was barely above a whisper. "They call them angry bees." Thepods. Thousands of them swarmed toward the Scourge battlecruiser. With surprising speed, the massive ship's point defense systems activated, destroying hundreds of the tiny projectiles. But there were simply too many. They impacted against the battlecruiser's hull, and instead of exploding, they attached themselves. "I don't understand," said General Verse. "What are they doing?" The footage zoomed in on one of the pods that had sprouted mechanical legs and was using what appeared to be a miniaturized plasma torch to cut through the battlecruiser's supposedly impenetrable armor, they're boarding it. Zixvoth explained each pod contains a single human soldier in what they call environmental battle armor. The pods are designed to breach hulls and deploy their occupants directly into enemy vessels. That's insane, sputtered Chief Commander. Drar, who would willingly launch themselves at relativistic speeds into an enemy warship, the G-forces alone, would they have a technology they call inertial dampeners? Zixvoth interrupted, and as for who would volunteer for such missions, well, humans, apparently, have a waiting list. The footage continued, showing the Scourge battlecruiser listing to one side as internal explosions rippled through its hull. In less than 20 minutes, the mighty vessel, pride of the Scourge fleet and terror of 3 spiral arms, began an uncontrolled descent toward the planet's surface, eventually crashing in an uninhabited region thousands of kilometers from the human settlement. Search teams dispatched to the crash site found no survivors among the Scourge crew. What they did find, however, were all 457 human soldiers celebrating their victory by planting a flag in the wreckage, and according to intelligence reports, hosting something called a barbecue, using parts of the ship's fusion reactor as a grill. That's one incident Chief Commander Tsar said, his mandibles now perfectly still. Perhaps the Scourge were careless. The Scourge Zixvoth reminded him have subjugated 13 species and destroyed 7 others. They were not careless. They were outmatched by a species that by all logic should have surrendered immediately. What about their physiology? Asked War. Prince Cathvar. Surely we can exploit their biological weaknesses. They require oxygen, do they not? And their internal temperature regulation is primitive. At best, Ambassador Zixvoth flicked. Through several data screens with her tentacles, their environmental suits negate most physiological vulnerabilities, but more concerning is their adaptability. Observe another hologram appeared showing a human outpost on what appeared to be an ice planet. The temperature readout at the bottom of the display showed ambient conditions of 70 degrees C. This is their mining colony on Europa, one of the moons of their origin systems, gas giant. Notice anything unusual? The apex hunters studied the footage. Humans were moving about outside their habitats, operating machinery with minimal protective gear beyond insulated clothing. How are they not freezing? Asked General Versi. They've genetically modified themselves. Zixvoth explained, this particular subgroup of humans has enhanced cold tolerance through a combination of increased brown fat deposits and what they call anti-freeze proteins derived from Arctic fish. Status report O'Malley came, and Captain Blackwood's voice through his earpiece. Devon paused his crawling to check the holographic display on his wrist. About 30 miles from the main power coupling, Captain. No resistance so far. These bug eyes really don't believe in security cameras in their ventilation. Systems don't get cocky. The Scourge have infrared sensing organs. They might not need cameras. Roger that, Devon replied, patting the device clipped to his belt. Good thing we came prepared. The device, lovingly nicknamed Cold Shoulder by its R&D designers, was emitting a field that masked Devon's heat signature, essentially rendering him invisible to infrared detection. It wasn't perfect. It couldn't actually cool him down without killing him. So instead, it created a sort of thermal hologram that made him appear to be part of the background temperature. Devon continued his progress through the ducts, occasionally consulting the 3D map projected by his wrist device. The map was being updated in real time as other members of the strike team fed data. Back to the colony's defense command. Hey, Captain, Devon whispered after a few more minutes of crawling. I've been thinking. Always dangerous specialist. Ha 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 ha. But seriously, why do alien ships always have ventilation ducts big enough for humans to crawl through? It seems like a major design flaw. There was a pause before Captain Blackwood replied. These aliens are 3 med tall with exoskeletons. Ali, their maintenance workers are probably the size of bears. These ducts aren't designed for humans to crawl through. They're designed for Scourge workers. And we're just small enough to take advantage of that. Oh, Devon considered this, so we're basically vermin to them, more like parasites. But yes, cool, always wanted to be the alien equivalent of a tapeworm. Devon arrived at a junction in the ventilation system and checked his map again. Taking a left here should be approaching the power coupling. Soon remember the plant. The charges set the timer for 15 minutes and get back to your entry point. The extraction pods will be waiting 15 minutes. Why? So long because Captain Blackwood said with audible patience, "We need time to evacuate all our people before this." Thing goes boom! This isn't a suicide mission, specialist. Devon grinned to himself as he crawled onward. Where's the fun in that, a few? Minutes later, he arrived at a large ventilation grill overlooking what had to be the main power coupling, a massive crystalline structure pulsing with energy, surrounded by alien technicians scuttling about on too many legs. "I've got eyes on the target," he whispered into his calm, moving to place charges now carefully. Devon removed the ventilation grill and set it aside. He then began extracting the specialized explosive devices from his backpack's sleek, matte black cylinders with glowing blue indicators. Each one was powerful enough to level a small building, and he had psi. Clicks, and were presumably their language, and pointed directly at Devon's position. Alarm klaxons immediately began blaring throughout the ship. "Oh, Ali, Captain!" Blackwood's voice crackled in his ear. "What's happening?" "Minor complication," Devon replied, hastily attaching the remaining explosives to the shaft wall. "I've been spotted setting charges now. Get out of there immediately, working on it." Devon activated the timer on the charges, but instead of 15 minutes, he set it for 3, then he turned and began crawling back the way he had come. Moving as fast as the confined space would allow behind him, he could hear the sounds of alien appendages trying to access the ventilation shaft. A quick glance at his wrist display showed multiple heat signatures converging on his position from different directions. "They're in the vents," he reported, breathing heavily as he picked up speed. "Multiple hostiles converging on my position. Can you make it to the extraction point?" Devon checked his map. "Negative. They're blocking my route and need an alternate exit strategy." There was a pause. "Then there's an external maintenance hatch, 2 junctions ahead on your right. It leads to the outer hull. We can position an extraction pod there, but you'll have about 45 seconds of vacuum exposure. My suit can handle that," Devon said, though he wasn't entirely sure if that was true. The environment suits were rated for brief vacuum exposure, but 45 seconds was pushing it. "It'll have to," Captain Blackwood replied grimly, "because those charges are going to blow in about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Devon finished. "Yeah, I may have adjusted the timer a bit. What they saw me, if I set it for 15 minutes, they'd have plenty of time to disarm the charges this way. They're too busy chasing me to worry about them. And if you don't make it out in time," Devon grinned, "despite the gravity of the situation, then I guess I'll go out with a bang, sir." He could practically hear Captain Blackwood's eye roll through the comm. "Just get to that maintenance hatch, O'Malley. That's an order, yes, sir." Devon reached the junction and took the right turn, crawling faster now, as he heard the alien scuttling growing louder behind him. Up ahead, he could see the maintenance hatch, a circular portal, with what appeared to be a rotating locking mechanism. "I can see the hatch," he reported, approaching now. Just as he reached the hatch, a section of the ventilation shaft behind him tore open, and a scourge soldier thrust its head and upper limbs into the passage. Its compound eyes locked onto Devon, and its mandibles clicked in what he could only assume was alien rage. "Hi there," Devon said, offering a little wave with his free hand, while his other hand worked the hatch mechanism. "Don't suppose you'd believe I'm doing routine HVAC maintenance." The alien let out a screech and lunged forward, its clawed appendages narrowly, missing Devon's boots as he pushed the hatch open and propelled himself through it, straight into the cold vacuum of space immediately. His suit's emergency systems activated, sealing all possible leaks and stiffening to maintain pressure. Devon felt the saliva on his tongue begin to boil before his helmet fully pressurized, and his ears popped painfully. "I'm outside the ship," he gasped into his calm, the words feeling strange in his mouth as his suit compensated for the lack of external atmosphere. "Where's my ride?" "Look to your 3 wow," came the reply. Extraction pod inbound 30 seconds. Devon turned his head and saw a small bullet-shaped pod rocketing toward him from the direction of the colony. His suit's oxygen reserves were already at 80% and dropping. The vacuum was finding microscopic leaks. Despite the suit's best efforts behind him, the maintenance hatch opened again and a Scourge soldier emerged, apparently wearing some kind of vacuum-adapted armor. It oriented itself and began moving toward Devon, with surprising grace using the ship's hull as leverage. "I've got company," Devon warned, pushing off from the hull to put distance between himself and the alien. The movement sent him tumbling into open space away from both the ship and his approaching extraction pod. "Stabilize yourself." Captain Blackwood ordered, "Use your maneuvering thrusters." Devon fumbled for the controls on his wrist. Activating the suit's small hydrogen peroxide thrusters, jets of steam shot from his shoulders and hips, arresting his tumble and allowing him to reorient himself toward the approaching extraction pod. The Scourge soldier, however, had launched itself directly at him, its multiple limbs outstretched like some nightmarish spider. 20 seconds to extraction. Camothy update in his ear. "Might need to speed that up a bit," Devon replied, activating his thrusters again to dodge the alien's lunge in the vacuum. The movement was eerily silent, just the soldier's armored form sailing past him, trailing vapor. From its own propulsion system, Devon's oxygen reserves hit 60%. His extremities were beginning to tingle from the cold seeping through his suit, and he could feel his heartbeat accelerating as his body struggled against the hostile environment. The extraction pod was close now, perhaps 50 meters away, and closing fast. Its automated systems had spotted him and were making course corrections to intercept the Scourge soldier. Had recovered from its missed attack and was reorienting for another pass. This time it fired something from a wrist-mounted weapon, a thin filament that shot toward Devon like a harpoon. "Look out!" someone shouted through the comm, but it was too late. The filament wrapped around Devon's leg and the alien began reeling him in 10 seconds. To extraction, Devon reached down to his utility belt and unclipped a small device, one of the few offensive weapons he'd brought along. It looked like a simple ball bearing, but when he squeezed it and tossed it toward the filament, it exploded in a shower of superheated plasma that severed the alien tether free again. Devon redirected himself toward the extraction pod, which was now close enough that he could see its entry hatch opening like a mechanical M5 seconds. The Scourge soldier fired another filament, but this one went wide as the alien itself was forced to evade a sudden barrage of covering fire from the colony's defense platforms. Beams of coherent lights sliced through the vacuum, forcing the soldier back toward the battle. Cruiser 32-1, Devon collided with the extraction pods. Open hatch, his momentum carrying him inside. As the automated systems immediately began closing the door behind him, the pod's interior pressurized rapidly and oxygen-rich air flooded in, causing him to gasp in relief. "I'm in," he managed between breaths. "Get me out of here." The extraction pod's engines fired at full power, accelerating away from the battle cruiser. Just as Devon's charges detonated, the massive explosion tore through the ship's power core, causing secondary detonations that rippled along its hull from the pod's view screen. Devon watched as the mighty vessel began to break apart, its structural integrity compromised beyond recovery. "Mission accomplished," he reported, allowing himself to sink back into the pod's padded interior, "though I may have singed my eyebrows a bit." "Good work, specialist," Captain Blackwood's voice replied, now coming through the pod's communication system rather than his helmet. "We'll discuss your unauthorized timer adjustment during the debriefing." Devon grinned, looking forward to it, sir, as the extraction pod rocketed back toward the colony. Devon couldn't help but think that for all their technological might, the aliens had made one critical mistake. They had assumed humans would behave logically. They had built their ship to withstand frontal assaults from capital ships, not infiltration by creatures willing to crawl through maintenance ducts with backpacks full of explosives. It was a mistake most species only made once when dealing with humanity. They weaponize everything. Ambassador Zixvoth explained as the footage ended, their scientific development isn't guided by theoretical advancement or spiritual awakening, but A simple question. How can we use this to protect ourselves or destroy our enemies? That seems primitive, said War Prince Cathar. Effective corrected General Vers, who had developed a grudging respect for the human's approach, primitive, would be sticks and stones. They've developed antimatter containment, controlled, fusion, and quantum entanglement communication, all originally for military applications. What's most concerning, continued Zixvoth, is their rate of technological advancement. Most species discover faster than light travel approximately 10,000 standard years after developing agriculture. Humans did it in less than 12,000 years from their first primitive tools to their first FTL jump. And now that they have access to galactic archives through salvaged alien technology, they're accelerating, finished Chief Commander Drar his mandible, clicking nervously. How many ships do they have? Zixvoth's tentacles rippled in the equivalent of a shrug. That's the other problem. They don't rely solely on large capital ships like most civilized species. Their fleet architecture is unconventional. Another hologram appeared, showing a bewildering array of human vessels ranging from massive carriers to tiny one-person fighters. They believe in redundancy and specialization. She explained rather than building. A few perfect ships, they build many different types for specific purposes: carriers, destroyers, corvettes, fighters, bombers, electronic warfare platforms, stealth vessels. The list goes on. That's inefficient, protested War Prince Kavar. The resources required to maintain such diversity are justified by their effectiveness in combat. Interrupted General Vers. I'm beginning to understand their strategy by fielding many different vessel types. They create complexity that's difficult to counter with a single approach precisely confirmed. Zixvoth, and most concerning of all, is their concept of asymmetric warfare. When outmatched, they don't surrender or fight honorably to the death. They change the rules of engagement entirely. She showed footage of a small human vessel approaching a. Those same techniques can be used to propel asteroids toward enemy planets. Zixvoth replied, They call it kinetic bombardment. No need for expensive anti-adder warheads or exotic weapons. Just drop a large rock from orbit and let gravity do the work. The gathered representatives fell silent again, contemplating the implications. Finally, Chief Commander Tsar spoke. So what are our options if these humans are as dangerous as you? Suggest, Ambassador, we cannot allow them to continue expanding unchecked. Zixvoth's tentacles writhed in a pattern, indicating extreme caution. That's why I've called this meeting. I believe we have three options, she raised, one tentacle first. We can attempt to contain them by establishing buffer zones around their territory, and heavily militarizing the borders. A second tentacle rose. Second, we can try to negotiate an alliance, bringing them into the fold of galactic civilization and hopefully moderating their more aggressive tendencies through cultural exchange. And the third option, asked General Vers, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Zixvoth's third tentacle rose slowly. We launch a preemptive strike with our combined forces. Hit them hard. Hit them fast before they grow any stronger. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices as the representatives debated the merits of each approach. War Prince Cathvar advocated for containment, arguing that direct conflict would be too costly. General Vers favored alliance, suggesting that human ingenuity could be redirected toward common threats. Chief Commander Dlar, however, insisted that preemptive action was the only logical choice. As the debate reached its peak, a chime sounded throughout the chamber, silencing all discussion. What is that? Demanded. Chief Commander Dlar. Ambassador Zixvoth checked her communication device, her tentacles suddenly going rigid with shock. It appears we have a visitor who would dare interrupt a High Council meeting of the Apex Hunters. War Prince Kavar's crystalline form vibrated with indignation. The chamber's massive doors slid open, revealing a figure that seemed almost comically small compared to the assembled alien representatives. A human dressed in a simple blue uniform with minimal ornamentation walked calmly into the center of the room. Greetings, said the human, offering a slight bow. I am Admiral Elena Costa of the United Earth Fleet. I apologize for the interruption, but I believe you're discussing matters that directly concern my species, and I thought it might be productive to have a representative present. How did you find this place? Demanded Chief Commander Dreller, mandibles clicking rapidly in agitation. This moon is shielded from all conventional detection methods. Admiral Costa smiled pleasantly. Yes, it is very impressive technology. We've been trying to reverse engineer it from the data we gathered when we planted the listening devices 6 months ago. A stunned silence fell over the chamber. You've been spying on us. Warrants Cathar's voice carried both outrage and disbelief. Spying is such a loaded term. The Admiral replied with a dismissive wave. We prefer preemptive intelligence gathering, and before you ask, yes, we've heard every word of today's meeting. She turned to address Ambassador Zixvoth directly. Your assessment of our capabilities was impressively thorough. Ambassador, though I must point out that the Kingfisher strike footage you showed was actually from a training exercise in real combat situations. We use a much higher density of projectiles. Ambassador Zixvoth's tentacles coiled tightly against her body, a sign of extreme distress in her species. Admiral, your presence here is a violation of galactic diplomatic protocols, perhaps, Costa acknowledged with a shrug, but I thought it more efficient than waiting for you to reach a decision and then having to respond to it this way. We can cut through several cycles of posturing and get straight to meaningful dialogue. She approached the crystalline war table and, without asking permission, activated its holographic interface. A new image appeared, a detailed map of human territory in relation to the various domains of Theapex hunter species. You've been discussing 3 options, the Admiral continued: containment, alliance, or preemptive strike. Allow me to save you some time by addressing each one. She pointed to the map. Containment would require establishing buffer zones here, here, and here. The problem is, we're already established in these regions through colony worlds or mining operations. You'd effectively be asking us to abandon sovereign territory, which is a non-starter general. Vers leaned forward, his 8 eyes fixed on the human, and Alliance Admiral Kusta smiled a much more promising avenue. Humanity has always valued cooperation when it's equitable. We'd be open to discussing trade agreements, technology exchange, mutual defense pacts, the usual foundations of interspecies relations, and if we chose the 3rd option, asked Chief Commander Dixar, his voice dangerously quiet. The Admiral's smile faded. Then I would strongly advise against it. Commander, not as a threat, but as a genuine concern for the welfare of all our species. With another gesture, she changed the holographic display to show what appeared to be ordinary human civilian ships transport. Vessels, mining platforms, colony ships. Then, with a subtle movement of her hand, the image is transformed, revealing hidden weapon systems, armor plating beneath civilian facades, and military-grade propulsion systems. Every human vessel is built with contingencies in mind, she explained. Even our civilian ships can be rapidly converted for combat if necessary. It's not because we're inherently warlike. It's because we evolved on a planet where preparedness meant survival. You're saying your entire civilian fleet is actually a sleeper armada war. Prince Cathar's crystalline structure vibrated with alarm frequencies. I'm saying we believe in redundancy, corrected the Admiral. And while individually none of your species might pose an existential threat to humanity collectively, she gestured around the chamber. Well, we take the Apex Hunter Alliance very seriously indeed. Is that a threat, Admiral? Demanded Chief Commander DLR. Not at all, she replied calmly. It's an invitation to understand each other better. You see, there's something Ambassador Zixvoth's excellent briefing didn't fully capture about humans. The Admiral walked slowly around the table, making eye contact with each representative. We are indeed adaptable, resourceful, and yes, sometimes aggressive when threatened, but we're also compassionate, curious, and eager to connect with other intelligent life. We don't want to conquer the galaxy. We just want our place in it. She stopped. Besides Zixvoth, the Ambassador showed you examples of humans fighting back when attacked. What she didn't show you were the 17 peaceful first contact scenarios we've had, or the thriving trade relationships we've established with the Arcturan, collective or the joint scientific outpost we maintain with the Proxima Indigenous Intelligence, those are minor species dismissed Chief Commander Drar, not apex predators, like ourselves. Admiral Costa raised an eyebrow. Is that how you see yourselves? Interesting, we don't categorize species by their predatory status. We evaluate them as potential friends, neutral parties or threats based entirely on their actions, not their evolutionary history. She returned to the center of the chamber. I came here today not to intimidate you, but to extend an invitation in 3 standard cycles. Earth will be hosting a galactic cooperation summit. Representatives from 37 spacefaring species will be attending to discuss everything from trade to cultural exchange. To shared environmental concerns, we would be honored if the Apex Hunter Alliance would send delegates with that. She placed a small device on the war table, a holographic invitation that expanded to display details of the summit. The choice, of course, is yours, she continued. You can view humanity as a threat to be contained or eliminated, or as a potential ally with much to offer. But I would suggest that in a galaxy full of wonders and dangers we have yet to discover, having more friends is generally preferable to having more enemies. The chamber remained silent as the representatives exchanged glances, nonverbal communications passing between them in the subtle languages of their respective species. Finally, it was General Verse who broke the silence. You infiltrated our most secure facility, the hidden headquarters of the most powerful military alliance in the galaxy, just to deliver a party invitation. The general's mandibles twitched in what might have been amusement. Admiral Kustova smiled. When you put it that way, it does sound a bit excessive, but first impressions matter, don't they? And I wanted to make it clear that humans value directness and transparency by spying on us. Chief Commander Tsar clicked sarcastically by knowing who we're dealing with. The Admiral corrected, just as you've been gathering intelligence on us, that footage of the Proxima Centauri incident wasn't exactly taken with permission. Was it? Ambassador Zix Voth's tentacles rippled with discomfort. How did you get past our security systems? This moon has quantum entanglement scanners, phase-shifted detection grids, and psychic dampening fields. Yes, very impressive technology. Admiral Kostova agreed to Kinga's seat at the war table as if she'd been invited. To join them, the chair designed for beings twice her size made her look like a child at an adult's table. But somehow she still commanded the room's attention. We had our best minds working on the problem. As it turns out, the best way past your security was, well, I'm not sure you'd believe me if I told you. Try us, War Prince Cathar challenged. The Admiral shrugged. We walked in through the front door. Impossible, scoffed Chief Commander Dielazar. Our entrances are guarded by chronolocked portals that only materialize for authorized biopatters cost of a finished for him. Yes, we know, fascinating technology. The thing is, your authorization system is based on recognizing specific neural patterns and quantum biomarkers unique to your species. It never occurred to you to program it to actively reject human patterns because until recently, you didn't consider us worth worrying. About. The apex hunters exchanged uncomfortable glances, so the Admiral continued pleasantly. When our infiltration team approached your entry points, the system had no specific instructions to keep us out. It was the equivalent of finding a members Sunley club that never bothered to define who couldn't be a member. General Vers made a sound that might have been a laugh. If insects could laugh clever, most species would have tried to hack the system or force their way in. That would have triggered your defenses, Costa replied. We preferred the path of least resistance. It's a very human approach. Why break down a door when you can find a key? Chief Commander Drar's compound. Eyes narrowed. And now that you've delivered your invitation, what happens next? Are we to believe you came alone, that there aren't human warships waiting outside our system? The Admiral's expression grew serious. Commander, If we wanted to attack this facility, we wouldn't have sent me in for a chat first. That's not how humans wage war. How do humans wage war? Admiral asked War Prince Cathar, his crystalline form glinting in the chamber's light. Reluctantly, she replied, but thoroughly. We prefer not to fight at all despite what you might think from the incidents you've observed. Those were defensive actions against aggressors, but when we do fight, she sighed. We commit fully. We don't believe in limited engagements or symbolic victories. We fight to win decisively. So we don't have to fight the same enemy twice. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. The implication was clear and chilling, but the Admiral continued, her tone brightening. That's precisely why I'm here, to make sure we never have to find out which side would prevail in such a conflict, because regardless of who won, the cost would be devastating for all involved. Ambassador Zixvoth's tentacles performed a complex gesture that translated roughly as cautious agreement. Your candor is refreshing, Admiral. Most species would approach this situation with more diplomatic obfuscation. Life's too short for that, Costa replied with a slight smile. Even with our advanced medical technology, the average human only lives about 130 years. We've learned not to waste time talking in circles, a practical approach, acknowledged General Verse. But you must understand our concern. Your species has expanded, rapidly militarized aggressively, and demonstrated remarkable aptitude for warfare, despite your relative youth as a spacefaring civilization. All true. The Admiral nodded. Because we exist. In a dangerous galaxy, the first aliens humanity encountered tried to harvest us for biological materials. The second attempted to colonize our home world. By the time we met anyone friendly, we'd already learned hard lessons about galactic realities. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. But consider this. Despite those early experiences, we haven't launched any unprovoked attacks against other species. We haven't attempted to conquer inhabited worlds or forced our culture on others. We've defended ourselves, yes, but we've also established diplomatic relations, trading partnerships, and cultural exchanges wherever possible. And what guarantees do we have that this behavior will continue as your power grows? Asked Chief Commander. De Lazar. Admiral Costa spread her hands. The same guarantee any species has about another: mutual self-interest and the foundations of trust we build together. That's why I'm inviting you to the summit. It's why I'm here unarmed in your secure facility. We're extending our hand, metaphorically speaking, and hoping you'll take it back on Earth. In the Unified Defense Command headquarters, beneath the rebuilt city of Geneva, a team of senior military officials and civilian leaders watched the encounter. Through Admiral Kostova's ocular feed, the room was tense, all eyes fixed on the massive display showing Thalian representatives from the Admiral's perspective. She's taking one hell of a risk, muttered General Takashi, Yamamoto drumming his fingers nervously on the conference table. If they decide to detain her. Or worse, we have no extraction plan that wouldn't trigger an interstellar incident. Dr. Amelia Wells, the civilian head of xenopolitical strategy, shook her head. It's a calculated risk. General, the psychological profile we've built of the Apex Hunter leadership suggests they respect boldness. A traditional diplomatic approach would have been interpreted as weakness. Besides, added Director of Intelligence Felix Okafor, Admiral Costa, volunteered for this mission, specifically because of her background in xenopsychology. She understands the cultural nuances at play better than anyone, and the quantum entanglement communicator implanted in her cerebral cortex allows us real-time observation. And if necessary, guidance. Still doesn't mean I have to like it. Yamamoto grumbled. One wrong word, one misinterpreted gesture, and we could be looking at a conflict with the 7 most militarily advanced species in the known galaxy, which is precisely why traditional diplomacy wouldn't work. Drwells insisted the Apex Hunters don't respect protocol and pleasantries. They respect strength, courage, and direct action. Admiral Costa giving them a demonstration of our intelligence capabilities, while simultaneously offering peaceful cooperation is exactly the right approach. On the display, they watched as the alien representatives continued their discussion with the Admiral. The translation software provided real-time subtitles of the various Alien languages, though, much of their communication remained nonverbal shifts in posture, colors, and movements that the software was still learning to interpret. Look at that director. Okafor pointed the Silicon Hegemony representative War Prince. Kavar, his crystalline structure is vibrating at frequencies associated with thoughtful consideration, not aggression, and General Verse's eye patterns suggest curiosity rather than hostility. What about the big bug? Asked Yamamoto, indicating Chief Commander. DLR, he still looks like he wants to either. Dr. Wells smiled. The arthropodians don't eat prey that way. General, and while the commander is clearly suspicious, his mandible posture indicates he's in an information-gathering mode, not a pre-attack stance. Leaders of Earth. A new voice spoke, causing everyone in the room to turn toward the doorway where President Alejandro Rivera had entered. What's our status? Everyone stood respectfully. As the president approached the main display, Admiral Costa has made contact with the Apex Hunter Council and delivered our invitation to the summit. Reported Dr. Wells' initial responses are cautious but not overtly hostile. The president nodded his weathered face, serious as he studied the alien representatives on the screen. And our contingency plans, the 6th Fleet remains at high alert in the Kuiper Belt. General Yamamoto replied, stealth platforms are deployed throughout the Sol system. At the first sign of hostile action, we can have reinforcements at the Clethora. Moon within 6 hours via jump point. And the Admiral's extraction options, Director Alipor cleared his throat. Limited, Mr. President, the facility's defenses would make a conventional extraction challenging. However, Admiral Costa is equipped with a quantum fold device worst-case scenario. She can activate it and return to Earth instantly at the cost of revealing one of our most advanced technologies, the president noted with a frown, better than losing one of our best officers. Dr. Wells countered President. Rivera nodded slowly, agreed. But let's hope it doesn't come to that. The Admiral seems to be handling the situation well indeed on the screen. They could see that the conversation had shifted to a more constructive tone. The alien representatives were now examining the details of the summit invitation, asking questions about logistics and security arrangements rather than issuing threats. She's doing it? Dr. Wells whispered, a note of awe in her voice. She's actually bringing them around. Back in the Apex Hunter Council chamber, Admiral Costa was answering a barrage of questions from the assembled representatives. Yes, we would provide secure accommodations for all delegates, she explained patiently. Each species would have quarters specifically designed to meet their biological needs, atmospheric composition, gravity, temperature, and so on. And weapons? Asked General Verse. Surely you don't expect us to attend unarmed. Ceremonial weapons only, the Admiral replied firmly. Just as I came here today, we understand the cultural significance of certain armaments for your species, but the summit is a place for words, not war preparations. Chief Commander Zark clicked his mandibles skeptically. And what exactly would be accomplished at this summit? Flowery speeches and meaningless platitudes. Concrete results, Costa-corrected trade agreements, non-aggression. Pacts, establishment of neutral zones, cultural exchange programs, joint scientific ventures, the foundations of a stable, mutually beneficial relationship between our civilizations. Why should we trust humans to honor such agreements? War Prince Cathar asked, his crystalline form oscillating with skepticism. Your species has demonstrated remarkable adaptability in interpreting rules and finding loopholes. Admiral Costa smiled, a fair point, which is why all agreements would be subject to verification. Protocols and regular review trust but verify an old. Human saying that has served us well. She stood up from the oversized chair, straightening her uniform. But I think the real question is, can any of us afford not to try? The alternative is perpetual suspicion, arms, races, buffer zones, and the constant threat of misunderstandings escalating into conflict. Is that the galaxy you want to leave to your descendants? The question hung in the air as the Apex Hunters considered her words. Finally, Ambassador Zixvoth spoke, her tentacles forming patterns that the Admiral's neural translator interpreted as cautious optimism. I believe the ambassador said that there may be merit in attending this summit at minimum. It would provide an opportunity to assess human intentions more directly than through intelligence reports and second-hand accounts. I concur, added. General Verse, surprising many in the chamber, the humans have demonstrated both martial prowess and now diplomatics. Initiative, either quality alone would warrant attention together. They demand on engagement war. Prince Cathavar's crystalline structure shifted through several color patterns before settling on a deep blue. The silicon hegemony will attend, if only to ensure our interests are represented in any potential agreements. All eyes turned to Chief Commander DLR, whose compound eyes remained fixed on Admiral Kustova. For several long moments he said nothing, his mandibles perfectly still. "You infiltrated our most secure facility," he finally said, "bypassed our defenses' ease, dropped on our deliberations, and then walked in uninvited to deliver a social invitation." "That's an accurate summary, yes," the Admiral acknowledged with a slight nod. To everyone's surprise, the commander's mandibles began to vibrate in what his species considered laughter. "I cannot decide if your species is brilliantly audacious or suicidally, reckless perhaps, both very well. Admiral Costa of Earth, the Arthropodian Confederation, will send representatives to your summit, if nothing else. It should prove." Enlightening, the Admiral managed to keep her expression neutral, though internally she felt a wave of relief. "Excellent. The details are all contained in the invitation I've provided. Transport can be arranged if needed." She gave a formal bow to the assembled representatives. "I thank you for your time and for not immediately executing me for breaching your security. I look forward to more productive discussions at the summit with that." She turned and began walking toward the chamber doors. Admiral called Chief Commander Tsar, causing her to pause and look back. "How do you intend to leave our facility the same way you entered?" She smiled. "Actually, Commander Ife, it's all the same to you. I'd appreciate an escort to my shuttle. It's currently attached to the dark side of your moon-powered, down to avoid detection by your perimeter." Scanners, the commander's mandibles clicked rapidly. "You had an extraction plan all along." "Of course," she replied. "We're reckless, not stupid." 3 weeks later, Admiral Elena Costa stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Harmony Station orbiting Earth at Laranji. The massive space station, purpose-built for the Galactic Cooperation Summit, glittered against the backdrop of space. Its various modules designed to accommodate the biological needs of dozens of different species. "Quite a view, isn't it?" came a voice from behind her. She turned to see President Rivera, approaching his formal attire indicating he had just come from one of the many preliminary diplomatic meetings taking place ahead of the summit's official opening. "Mr. President," she acknowledged with a respectful nod, "it is indeed hard to believe we built all this in just 18 months. Amazing what humanity can accomplish when properly motivated," he replied, joining her at the viewport. "The first ships from the Apex Hunter Alliance arrived an hour ago. The Arthropodian delegation is already settled in their quarters, and the others are in the process of docking." Admiral Costa felt a flutter of nervous energy and security tight, but not oppressively. "So as you suggested, we're emphasizing cooperation rather than suspicion. Armed personnel are present, but discreet. The quantum scanners are monitoring for any potential threats without being intrusive." She nodded approvingly. "Good first impressions matter." Speaking of which, the president continued. "Chief Commander Tsar has requested a private meeting with you before the formal proceedings begin, apparently. You made quite an impression." The Admiral raised an eyebrow. "Did he say what he wants to discuss?" "No, but his tone was described as respectfully curious rather than hostile." "I think you may have a fan, Admiral." She laughed softly. "Well, that's unexpected. I'll meet with him." "Of course. Good." The president turned to face her directly. "Alina, what you did, infiltrating their headquarters, facing down the 7 most powerful military leaders in the galaxy. Alone, it was either the bravest or the most foolhardy action I've ever authorized, possibly both." "It worked, didn't it?" she replied with a slight smile. "It did. and history may well record it as the moment that changed humanity's place in the galaxy. He extended his hand on behalf of Earth and all human colonies. Thank you. She shook his hand firmly. I just did what any of us would have done. Mr. President found a way to turn potential enemies into potential friends. Humanity. Yeah, the president murmured with a small smile. I beg your pardon, sir. He chuckled, just remembering an old phrase from the early days of our space expansion. Before your time, perhaps it was a sentiment about human exceptionalism, often shouted enthusiastically, if not eloquently. Ah! She nodded, turning back to the viewport where a massive crystalline vessel, clearly of silicon hegemony design, was approaching one of the docking bays. Well, perhaps we are exceptional in some ways, not superior, but different, adaptable sometimes. Reckless, often ingenious occasionally, noble and now diplomats. The president added, who would have.